Thank you, Gerard. And just a reminder for those of you who weren't here in the morning, please do not sit or stand in the stairs leading up. The fire marshal would be very unhappy. We need to be able to exit if there is an emergency. Also, one other announcement that the cart provider asked me to mention to you. There seems to be a lot of talking going on in the room, even during presentation. This makes it very hard for those who are listening carefully to understand what is going on in order to put it on the screen. So please minimize your conversations. If you have to have a conversation, take it outside. Yes, I've heard I'm a taskmaster. So be it. I lead an organization, what can I say? I'm very, very happy now to introduce the session that was going to happen this morning. And we have the three speakers with us now, starting with Catalina Devandas, who is the UN Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, but used to work with me as one of our program officers. And we also have two representatives from grantee organizations of the Disability Rights Fund and Disability Rights Advocacy Fund here. One from Indonesia, Yeni, Rosa, Damayanti, and one from Uganda, Apollo Mukasa. Because this afternoon session is relatively brief before the coffee and tea break, what we are going to do is mix it up again a little bit. So two of the presenters, Catalina and Yeni, will present before the tea break at 2:45. Then at 3, when you all come back promptly, Apollo will present, and then we will have a discussion. So I would like, with that, to turn the floor over to Catalina to begin this session. Thanks.
Thank you, Diana, and good afternoon to all of you. It's a big pleasure for me to be here. It's always a challenge to address a community of people that is working on the main challenges to address when it comes to the rights of persons with disabilities, and especially when in my case I have to talk from a very broad perspective. I will try to be mindful of time, and given that my former boss, will keep it very strictly, and I think that it's also an opportunity to reflect on the 10 years that had passed and how we have utilized the momentum of the CRPD negotiations and the CRPD adoption to advance the agenda on the rights of persons with disabilities, but also to talk and discuss about challenges and potential strategies that we need to consider moving forward when it comes to the disability politics. And I will need to back up to be able to see the screen there, because, what do I have to do forward? It just doesn't, okay, there it is. So I don't need to insist in that the fact that we all know that the convention introduces a revolutionary paradigm shift, that we moved in principle, in theory, and I want to emphasize that, from the medical model to the social or human rights model of disabilities. And the most important and the major change is that with the adoption of the convention, we got an international binding instrument, a human rights treaty that actually it's binding for those states that ratifying them. With the adoption of the convention, with the momentum that was created towards the negotiation, and I'm very happy to hear that tomorrow you will have discussions on how that negotiation process impacted the lives of many persons with disabilities. But after that momentum, I think that we have gotten a lot of opportunities from the CRPD. Of course, the logic and most visible one is the establishment of the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Then, of course, how other treaty bodies that were not as active on addressing the rights of persons with disabilities into their work started to do that in a more progressive manner, so to say. And so we have good examples with the CEDAW, CRC, and also the CESC. although I'm probably going to mention those treaties also in the challenge, those treaty bodies also later on when we discuss the challenges. But we are seeing advancements with other treaty bodies. We have, as was discussed this morning, the national monitoring frameworks that are working in different ways in different countries, but we have that new model that was also introduced by the convention and in link, or hopefully in link with the NHRIs. We also have a door open with other international law, not necessarily with human rights law, but we started discussions in another ground with, for instance, humanitarian law. And so how are we rereading the humanitarian treaties in the light of the CRPD? And I know this links to the questions that Gerard put to us this morning as well, but that I think has been an opportunity, and it's proven that now we have better conversations also with those working in the humanitarian law field. We have, and I need to explain that, the creation of this new mandate that I represent today, the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And I need to go a little bit and to explain that, mostly because nobody knows what a Special Rapporteur is, and nobody knows what a Special Rapporteur does, even Special Rapporteurs sometimes. So, but basically, I think it's important to look at it because, first of all, because it's new. We used to have the Special Rapporteur on Disability, which was the ad hoc monitoring mechanism that was created for the standard rules, but that is not the same as having a special procedure under the Human Rights Council. And I'm going to explain why. And this is because, first of all, it has a status that is recognized by the Human Rights Council. It reports to the Human Rights Council and to the General Assembly, and it has economic support from the human rights, from the UN system, from the OHCHR, by the Secretariat, which means not that we get paid, but that we get support so that we get support to produce reports, to edit reports, and to undertake country visits. One important aspect of the Special Rapporteur mandate is that it's universal. That means that I can work, and any other Special Rapporteur that will come after me will be able to work with countries that have ratified the Convention, but also with countries that have not ratified the Convention. And I think this is of particularly importance because the monitoring frameworks of the CRPD apply only for those countries that have ratified the Convention. So the added value of the Special Rapporteur is that it could monitor countries that have not ratified the Convention. Also, that I have the possibility, as I mentioned, to do country visits and issue reports on those country visits. So I go, stay 10 days, I try to do an assessment of the situation of rights of persons with disabilities and then make recommendations. And again, this could happen both in countries that have ratified or not ratified the Convention. And that is a way of providing guidance on how to implement the Convention and how to move forward with the implementation of the rights of persons with disabilities. We have the possibility of doing communications, and that means to engage with countries in a bilateral conversation about why that country is potentially violating the rights of persons with disabilities. So I receive complaints about grave human rights violations of persons with disabilities, and then I have the possibility to interact with the government on a one-to-one basis to try to solve the situation. If the situation is not solved, I can make the information publicly available. I have the possibility, and all the special rapporteurs will have, of doing thematic reports, which will also provide guidance, recommendations, and will signal main gaps on the situation of persons with disabilities. One important role of the mandate is to provide technical assistance to states, and I'm also touching on this because then I will ask you, how can you support the mandate of the special rapporteur to do all of this stuff? And then also, we have two big opportunities to mainstream or to include the discussions on the rights of persons with disabilities into other mandate holders' work. So we are working, for instance, with the Special Rapporteur on Culture, the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Health, the Special Rapporteur on Indigenous Peoples, the Special Rapporteur, the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, the Working Group on against discrimination and law and practice against women. There are several mandates, other special rapporteurs that weren't working on the rights of persons with disabilities, and thanks to the creation of the mandate and the influence of the mandate or the advocacy of the mandate to include the rights of persons with disabilities are doing it. And of course, there is the coordination with the CRPD committee, which I think it's very important to highlight because we are both supporting each other's work. If I go to a country, I follow up on the recommendations that the committee already did to that country. If the country hasn't been reviewed, my report is going to inform the process of review of the CRPD committee. And so that completes the circle of monitoring as well. Okay, after all those opportunities that have appeared for us, we also have opportunities when it comes to the UN system, because the UN system, and you had, of course, read the famous report of Gerard and Teresia about how the UN system and the UN human rights machinery were not considering persons with disabilities or their rights in a very substantial manner. So we are tackling those with the whole treaty bodies and the special procedures, but we also have another kind of entrance that is the more policy entrance with the UN system as a whole. We need to work, and we have now open doors, although this is not happening as we would like to, and I will highlight that later, but we have now opportunities to work with the UN agencies on a different ground. So we are working with the ILO, with the WHO, with UNICEF, with UNITAR, with the WIPO, with different agencies on their different areas of interest to include references to the rights of persons with disabilities, and that is a process of capacity building that is taking place and that agencies are now open to discuss. The same goes to the Secretariat of the UN, which was not as open to the discussions. We have also been able to influence, thanks to a convention, big major international processes, like the process of the Sendai framework for the disaster risk reduction, the World Humanitarian Summit. We are going to influence most probably also the Common Habitat process, and the most significant one, of course, the process of the Sustainable Development Goals. In the Sustainable Development Goals, where you all know, I hope that we have gotten 7 references in the goals and then 3 references in the declaration, and which will have, I believe, the most important impact when it comes to including the needs and rights of persons with disabilities into development actions. And again, all these opportunities, which I think it's also important to reflect on, is that it might seem that they happen only at international level, but in reality, all this is translating into change at national level, at a lower pace, I know, but it is actually, and the final aim is to influence changes at national level, and that's the case with the SDGs. But we have to be clear as well, as I have mentioned, none of this would have been achieved without the convention. The convention gave us the key to enter into all these processes. But now we had the momentum, we had all those opportunities. What are the challenges we're facing? And I think this is what I'm seeing, and I'm probably leaving a lot of things behind in this presentation for the sake of time. But I think that one main challenge I'm seeing is understanding what participation means, what active engagement and participation of persons with disabilities means, which is at the core of the convention. And without that, we are not going to really meaningful change any kind of process. And that, I think, although it's very present in every single speech and discourse that I've heard in the UN, it's still not the case when you go to the ground. How states, how UN agencies are consulting and engaging directly with persons with disabilities or the representatives organization, that is still a big challenge in terms of accessibility, a big challenge in terms of outreach, a big challenge in terms of support to the creation and functioning of organizations of persons with disabilities. And I cannot go further on that, but I produced a report that was presented to the Human Rights Council in March on the issue. So I would recommend to look at the report. Then I already have to stop. Okay. I will have to take a little bit more, boss. Sorry. I will try to run, okay? Okay, so I've been saying this, and I think it's the moment to move from nothing about us, without us, do nothing without us. I think that the participation in decision-making actually should translate into that. It's not anymore about disability-specific processes. It's about all processes being inclusive of persons with disabilities. We need to see more DPO support and capacity building, and one important thing, we need to address the potential tensions with organizations for persons with disabilities, including international NGOs. But this is something that we need to do carefully because we also need allies. We need to build a case for implementation in two areas, in the area of policy development and the legal case. And I think that relates to what was discussed this morning, at least the legal case part. We moved a lot with the what, and now we need to move a lot with the how. Because the question now is, how are we going to do it? Okay, we have the framework, we have the tools, but how are we going to do it? We have the references and the SDGs. How are we going to make this process actually inclusive and resulting in changes in the lives of persons with disabilities? And for that, we need, and I think a big challenge for the whole room here, as those that are developing knowledge and information and papers on these areas, we need information on policy development. How are we going to influence the process of the SDGs? We need to discuss further the cost of exclusion and build the evidence so that we can provide that evidence to policymakers. And I think that the example that you gave today of the cost of the institutionalization in Ireland is a good example, but we need to move from examples to actual evidence. We need to invest in data collection for policy development, not only for advocacy, and we have big challenges in getting the international community agreeing on the methodology that would be able to collect that data for us. We also need to work on the indicators and the right indicators, human right-based indicators, not just indicators. Then we need to work on budgeting and, of course, and most importantly, in capacity building of states and the UN system. And I will insist on that just a little bit later on. The legal case, I believe that I will rest it with what Jared said today. We are, after the momentum we had with the convention, we are seeing now that we're facing some resistance. We are not as nice anymore. And I think that at the beginning it was, and I think Alberto said it this morning, nobody can say no to persons with disabilities, right? I mean, we're so nice, we're so cute, et cetera, et cetera. So, but it's no longer the case. We are seeing more and more that the human rights system is not as happy with some of the interpretations that we are producing on the CRPD. And so we really need to build the arguments, strong arguments, in collaboration with those that are in the other side right now, those mainstream human rights lawyers, to come and build those arguments for us. And here, the idea of having and building a strategic alliances becomes even more important, because now it's the disabilities movement engaging with other sectors to create more solid responses to the challenges we have ahead. So moving forward, what I think I need, and we are finishing with that, Diana. But I think that, of course, we need more resources. I didn't touch a lot on this, but we really need to have more resources, both in terms of academic resources, but also, and of course, that will reinforce the academic work, but we need more international cooperation resources to be able to tackle some of the challenges that I pointed. We need to build the capacity of other human rights as stakeholders, and I think this is extremely important. Sometimes we have these nice discussions among ourselves and they go into depth and we go into very sophisticated discussions, but we haven't been unable to engage with other human rights actors and to build their capacity. Because after we have been discussing this for 20 years now, and after the convention and during the convention negotiation, etc., and we have been building our own capacities on this, on very difficult areas, what I'm seeing is that sometimes when I deal with other human rights experts, we have to literally start from zero, not knowing any kind of terminology, not understanding anything on the social model, not understanding what we are talking about. So we really need to make an investment on building that capacity and working to do that. And we need to, I think that mentioned that already, that we need to strengthen our collaboration or arguments in collaboration with other mainstream champions. And we really need to be very hard, and I want to finish with that, on the medical model. Because I see that, although we say it a lot, there is still this prevalence and this whole prevalence, this idea of the medical model entrenched in the heads of every stakeholder outside the disability community. For me, that has been the main channel, the main challenge. We still face discussions in which demedicalization of persons with disabilities is absolutely terrifying. Perhaps my message is we need to remember the basics to be able to achieve the most sophisticated gains in this run or in this fight. So basically, go back to the basics and go and fight for the medical model, because we really need to win that battle before being able to achieve anything else. I think that was it, and thank you very much. I leave it there for questions.
Thank you, Catalina. I think
on the transcript there was a word missing, and it says we need to fight for the medical model, and we need to fight against the medical model.
Okay, sorry, let me just repeat that so everybody can hear. Judy was pointing out that the transcript was incorrect, that it said that we need to... Catalina meant that we need to fight against the medical model, not for the medical model. So just to be clear. Thank you. Thank you, Catalina. Very strong presentation. If you ever need another job after, come back to me. Are there any questions?
One of the most challenging aspects of this thing is that we might face reprisals from our own governments for approaching the rapporteur or the committee for that matter. So how does the rapporteur deal with these problems? Right.
Well, thank you very much for the question. And first of all, we have some terms of confidentiality. So in case of, if you approach me and I have to work on a communication and you don't want to disclosure your name or the name of the organization, that is possible. However, it will be difficult, and it is true that in some individual cases, we might need to have the name of the victim, because the government will come to me and say, I cannot solve the issue unless I know who is that I need to save or rescue from this. So this might be an issue. And so we normally enter into a discussion with the victim to see how far they want to go and to balance, what is the potential risk. In terms of reprisals, which have become an issue more often for persons with disabilities, although not in the big majority of the cases, but starting to happen, we are also starting to work with the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders to see how we can address those issues. And I can also address the issue of reprisals in a communication with states. But again, I also have to be very honest about the extent of the capabilities of a special rapporteur. This is only so far we can go, and we cannot provide for full protection in case of engagement with the special procedures. So it's also important to note.
There's a question on the left from Tunisia.
Yes, Dr. Shaka from Tunisia. Catalina, I'm a blind person. I cannot see your face, but I hear your voice. And I understand through your voice that you are a very strong woman, and you are going to go very far in your mission. You said that you can even monitor countries that haven't yet ratified the CRPD. My question is, have you or do you intend to monitor Ireland and the United States that haven't yet ratify the CRPD. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, it would be possible. Of course, those countries would have to accept my, or to invite me, or to accept my request to perform a country visit. And it would be possible, yes. I have not anticipated to make a visit to either of those countries. In the second case, because it's just such a big country that it's quite complex. But if there is an opportunity and it becomes clear that it will be strategic to go, we can consider that. The only thing with the country visits, and I think it's important to also have that in mind, is that I can only do 2 country visits a year. So that's very limited, and I know because everybody wants me to go or wants the special procedure to go. So it's very complicated to make the decisions on where to go. So strategically, what I try to do is to say, okay, the first set of visits were to try to highlight best practices, because ideally I wanted to start showing countries that even small countries can do significant advancements if they have the political will into that. But now it will change little by little, and I won't say which country, but I will definitely go to a country that has not ratified the convention.
So, Kata, you made a comment earlier about how more and more human rights communities are not so happy with us. I'm wondering if you could give a little bit more information about some of the pushback you're getting.
Well, that's the difficult question. No, but, and I said that I mentioned, and I forgot it now also because I was running, but we are seeing, we're facing some challenges when we are interpreting some aspects of the CRPD with the CEDAW committee, and then with the Human Rights Committee, also with the subcommittee on torture, for instance. And so with the CEDAW committee, it will be on the issue of discriminatory abortion on the basis of disability, for instance. On the Human Rights Committee, there's a lot of things actually, but that we are also facing challenges with them when it comes to the full recognition of legal capacity and the elimination of any kind of forced treatment. With the SPT in the same line, although with the SPT, I think it might be potentially easier to solve, but they also issue some guidance note that are not compliant with the CRPD, and although the tension is not as strong, still the document is there. And so that's the kind of, some of those challenges are because of lack of awareness sometimes, but some of them are already a conscious decision not to agree with the interpretation that the CRP committee is making of the convention. And so that, I think it's a big issue, and we need to, but that's why I say build a case very strongly to fight that. And so the comment that Jared made this morning is pretty valid, although I think that we really need to keep it to this kind of internal discussions to see how we are going to overcome that kind of challenge.
I think we're only going to do one more question right now, and then that we will have some time later.
Thank you. I'm Frederick from Tanzania. I have 2 questions. The first one about visiting the countries that have not signed to the convention. I just want to know, what do you do with that report when the country does not have a commitment as far as the UN's RPD is concerned? What do you do with that? The second question, of course, you are suggesting that we need to fight against the medical model. And sometimes we do promote a twin-track approach, specific services for people with disabilities, but also working on mainstreaming. I don't know, how do you relate with this when you are like, okay, we need to avoid medical model, at the same time advocate for twin-track approach?
Well, thank you very much. Now can you help me remind? The first question was on the report from a country that has not ratified. Well, even, I mean, of course, I can only visit UN's member states. And UN member states have, in principle, agreed to the convention by its adoption at the General Assembly, to the principles of the convention. So the convention is already, but even if they don't want to recognize anything in the convention, the rest of the human rights treaty machinery applies to persons with disabilities as well. So we can definitely, I can report, the report will be submitted to the to the Human Rights Council, and the Human Rights Council will put it to consideration in their discussion. So it will raise the awareness, it will highlight gaps, etc. So it will be useful, and I think that the countries can also, some of the countries are actually requesting information to advance with the ratification process. So it can even inform the process of the country and guide them towards the process of ratification. On the twin-track approach, of course that we would like to see a twin-track approach. We still need, and perhaps I didn't explain that when I was talking about the nothing without us. Of course, we need both specific policies and programs and be part of the mainstream actions. But that is a separate discussion from the discussion on the medical model, which was the model in which persons with disabilities were not recognized as subjects of rights, but more as subjects of medical treatment. And that is what has to be changed dramatically, and which is actually at the core of the convention to change, but even though people said that they are compliant with the CRPD, they're not acknowledging that deep inside they are considering that they're still thinking from a medical model point of view.
Thank you. I'm going to make a radical decision to take us to 3 o'clock for the tea break. So I'm pushing back the tea break by 15 minutes so that we can have Yeni have enough time to present. And I'm very happy to next pass the floor to Yeni Rosa Damayanti, who is the founder and chair of the Indonesian Mental Health Association, which is the first group of people with psychosocial disabilities to exist in Indonesia. Yeni. Can she use this clicker as well?
Thank you.
Sorry, slight technical difficulties.
Maybe because it's supposed to be.
Oh, it was supposed to be.
Yeah. We changed the.
Yeah, that's. Is it to there? There. I click it there? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Yeni Rosa Damayanti. I'm the chair of Indonesian Mental Health Association, just like Diana mentioned before. I would like to talk about one of the work that my organization had conducted from 2014 up to now is about the right to vote. Probably the question is that why the right to vote? As an organization of a person with psychosocial disability, of course, the right to make decision is one of our fundamental problems. And we have to start from something. Well, we started from different aspects. One of the aspects that we deem very important is our political participation. Because if as a citizen we cannot vote, then we are not counted as citizen. So this is one of the things, if we talk about the right to make decision, the legal capacity that we have to tackle if we do not yet receive the full, the whole fulfillment of our right to vote in the election. So, let's start. Oh, this one. This one? All right. Before, I'd like to talk about the situation of person with psychosocial disability and disability and human rights movement in Indonesia. When we started this campaign, the rights of person with psychosocial disability is not yet, wholly included in the disability movement in Indonesia. We only becoming involved in the whole disability movement only probably 2013. So very, very recently. And thanks to CRPD for that, because without that, we still deem as an outsider. Even I think in many parts of Indonesia, we still seem as outsider. But in big cities, probably they're starting to accept us. But yeah, this is one of the problem that we face, and the thing that we have to really overcome to becoming fully recognized as part of disability movement. And of course, if we even do not consider as part of disability movement, how could the mainstream human rights movement see us as also as one of their agenda? So this is also, of course, one of the problem that we have to face. We need to fight our position or our place within the disability movement, and we need also to fight for our place within the democracy and human rights movement. Yeah, I already told before that the right to vote is a symbol of the rights to make decision. And we started this in 2014 because at that time we have two big elections in Indonesia. One is the presidential election and another one is the legislative election. The media, ridiculed the mistake by Electoral Commission who mistakenly registered person with psychosocial disability in their list of voters, saying that they list crazy people in the list of voters. The ridiculement in media is outrageous and really makes me angry at the time. Right, this is one of the examples. So we started to try to analyze the law. And we found out that in Indonesia we have three different laws concerning election. One is the law concerning the presidential election. Another one is a law concerning the legislative election. And another one is law concerning the elections of regional and district level head of district level and provinces. So three different kind of laws. Fortunately, for the first law and the second law, the presidential election and legislative election, there is no specific mention in that law that accept people from casting their vote. So I think, there's no limitation in this. It's just people perception that person with psychosocial disability cannot vote. But in the law concerning the regional, the election of the head of the province and head of district, there is a specific article saying that person with unsound mind, they call it unsound mind, or have disturbed mentally disturbed, cannot be registered as voters. But the first two laws do not really mention anything. So we developed two strategies. The first one is to make sure that we vote in the presidential and legislative election, because there's no law prohibiting us in doing so. It's just people perception, the culture that make us cannot vote. And then to tackle the issue of the third law, which is saying that person with unsound mind cannot vote, we have to do the judicial review of the said law. Right, we cannot fight alone. Like what Catalina has said, that we need to be part of broader movement. So we seek ally from within the disability movement and outside of disability movement. Outside of disability movement, we have we choose one of the biggest election-focused NGO in Indonesia, which is called Perludem, to be our ally. And fortunately, they are quite open with this. And for the disability movement, we drag, actually at the time, we forcibly dragged them to be with us. The Center for Accessible Election and Person with Disability. And then we, of course, we need someone with the law background, so we also took with us Jakarta Legal Aid Foundation. And here, I also would like to stress the becoming engaged with other sectors, because honestly, I have my advantage here. I've been working quite long time with movement outside of disability movement. And I've been active in human rights and women movement for probably 20 years before I started to address my own disability. You know, this is about 7 years ago. So I knew many friends outside of the disability movement, and that is one of our advantage. And that's why I always encourage my disability activists, my fellow disability activists, to really engage themselves with the movement and with the actors of the movement outside of the disability. Yeah, this is our legal basis. The presidential and legislative election, we have general election that do not limit our participation. And for judicial review, we have Indonesian Constitution and CRPD. CRPD, of course, always becoming part of our legal basis. Oops. Yeah, we target our advocacy at the Indonesian Electoral Commission, because they are, of course, the one that responsible to govern all the legislative processes. And a lot of works in lobby and advocacy, a lot of works in negotiating with them, meeting with the Electoral Commission, forcing them to release a circular letter that forced them to register a person with psychosocial disability in their area, forced them to make a statement in the media. And yeah, this is also one of the interesting things. We also targeting the mental institution, because they are the epitome of stigma, discrimination, and violation of the rights of a person with psychosocial disability. So we wanted to send a very strong message that person with psychosocial disability has the rights to make decision and the rights to make a political decision. Even like in election. So we would like to make sure that there is a voting booth in the institution, the mental health, the mental hospital, and the social shelters for person with psychosocial disability. And we forced the Electoral Commission to release a circular letter saying that the local Electoral Commission have to make sure that there is a voting booth in the mental institution and in the institution and in the social shelters in this institution as well. Right? Yeah, well, we have many problems, and we always trying to tackle the problems right away. For example, the resistance of the institution to allow the voting booths to be placed in their institution. We went up to the Ministry of Health to talk about this issue. Now, this is also a very important one, the ID card problems. Most of persons with psychosocial disability in Indonesia, many of them do not have identity card, because people see them as not as a citizen, less than a person. They do not need anything, so why do they have to have ID card? I mean, they do not go anywhere, you know. While the requirement to vote in the election is that they have to have ID card. So while doing this advocacy, we have to also tackle these ID card problems, which is actually the very basic rights of a citizen. Without ID card, you cannot get any health insurance and stuff. Right, we did some voters education, including in the mental hospitals. And finally, during the election day, there are about almost 10 mental hospitals, more than 10 mental hospitals all over Indonesia, whose the residents, we call it patients, are casting their votes in the mental hospital and also in social shelters. And the results are varied because we have two presidential candidates. One, because you know I'll show you this one. There is a legal complaint from the political parties saying that you should not let person with psychosocial disability in mental hospital to vote because they easily influence, they do not have the sound mind, they cannot make right decision, they are very, you just cannot do that. And they accuse the Electoral Commission to violate the law. So the result is, the result is very funny because there are some mental hospitals that choose the candidate A, and there's mental hospitals who choose the candidate B. So what is the meaning of the right choice? You cannot do the wrong choice in the election because, of course, you always accuse of having the wrong choice by the, by the other side of the. So there's nothing wrong with having this. So yeah, this is a, but we always took the problem seriously because we reported this complaint to what's so-called the election supervisory body. So all the violation of this election process, we reported to this election supervisory body because we cannot just let it go. We need to teach them lessons that what your stance is wrong. So they call them, and also there are some local commissioners that did not do the registration of person with psychosocial disability. They took them and almost make a criminal case against them. But then finally they said that, okay, this is not intentionally, they just received warnings. But for us it's good because at least they recognize that the right to vote is one of our basic rights. Okay. I need to stop because there's another one, actually, the story of how we do the judicial process, the judicial review of the law. But the judicial review is still in the process. The report is not yet come out, but it is another story which is also as interesting as the previous one. Thank you.
We have only time for a couple of questions before the coffee break. I'll take two questions, but I also wanted to point out that Yeni's organization recently worked with Human Rights Watch to produce this report about abuses against people with psychosocial disabilities in institutions in Indonesia. There's a practice called shackling or pasung that is quite horrible. So thank you, Yeni. And there is a question right away here. And any other question from the audience, just so I know? Well, we'll start with you.
Thanks so much, Farhad from Kazakhstan. Well, thank you for your presentation. I understand that you're concentrating on psychosocial disabilities, but I'm very interested in the accessibility of polling stations and any material for persons with other types of disabilities. For example, do you have like accessible booths during the election, or material like ballots in Braille, or let's say Electoral Commission staff who know how to work with persons with hearing and visual disabilities? Do you have any accessibility like that in Indonesia? I'm very interested in this. Thanks.
Yeah, we actually, the advocacy of person with disability as a whole has been conducted for years before we started our advocacy for psychosocial disability. So I think it started for 2 elections already, and they quite successful. The Electoral Commission already started to make regulations to make the election process accessible. For example, like to facilitate the blind and the deaf person during the voting days. The problem is that Indonesia is so huge, so there are only, you know, the regulation only applicable or implemented in some big cities, but not in remote areas. And even in some big cities, when they did monitoring throughout the process, there are still many places which is not accessible. Either the place itself is not accessible, or the voting tools are not accessible. But the regulation, we do have that.
One question down here, and then we're going to go for coffee.
Thank you. Yeah, for your presentation. Actually, even in Tanzania, we have the same law that restricts people with their social mental health to vote. I'm just curious. If I understood you well, you said you managed to to advocate for placement of special booths for people with psychosocial health problems in institutions. What about those who were not in the institutions? They didn't have that opportunity, and what do you think could be done even to reach those who are not in the institutions?
The the policy of the Electoral Commission is that the local, it means the district and sub-district and down to the village level Electoral Commission must register all persons with psychosocial disabilities in that area. In that sense, that even they said that those who already crossed out before, because there's news in the media that they crossed out person with psychosocial disability, they have to put back the names into the list of voters. We are concentrating in the institution because people tend to think that, okay, those who are not institution, probably they're already cured, whatever, you know, so it's not difficult. But the person who's still in the institution seem as the one that do not have any rights. So we both monitored in the institution and outside of institution. Outside of institution, we would like to make sure that the names that been crossed out put back into the list, and the one institution we have to make sure that they are registered as voters and they did do the voting.
Thank you. We're going to go now and take a coffee tea break for 15 minutes, and then please come back to hear Apollo at 3:15.